Texas, a 6-point dog against the red-hot Ohio State Buckeyes. Over-under in this game, 53.5, and 82% of the money is on the over in this game. That's always interesting. We got to start with the man himself, guys. Jeremiah Smith, him matching up against this Texas secondary. Really, I don't know that this will decide the game, but I think it's definitely the thing that people are going to be watching the most. Texas has only allowed one receiver to go over 100 yards all season, and that was TJ Moore of Clemson. I'm guessing a lot of those were in the second half when Clemson was rallying there. The interesting thing, and I want to start with you on this, Dame, the interesting thing for Texas, their top three corners have played 70% of their snaps in zone. That's Jahdae Barron, Malik Muhammad, and Jalen Gilbo. And Jeremiah Smith broke Rondale Moore's Big Ten freshman touchdown record with 13 touchdowns. Jeremiah Smith was pretty explicit, and I liked it when he basically told Oregon, like, if you play man, I'm throwing at you. When it comes to zone and it comes to game planning, and obviously Texas has leaned more on that, what does that mean from a game planning perspective, and how do you think when you're talking about Ohio State, they've got other weapons, obviously, but Jeremiah Smith seems to have ascended to another plane. What does that mean from an Ohio State attack perspective? Like, if you're game planning and you're looking at that, what does that change what you want to do in the passing game?
So it's interesting, right? Because, like you said, Texas plays zone, and they play it very well. And the biggest part when you're playing zone defense, the most important part, whether you're a corner, whether you're a linebacker, is to reroute. You want to knock the receiver off of his route, off of whatever his track is. That way you disrupt the timing, because a lot of these throws, a lot of these routes, a lot of these connections between quarterbacks and receivers is all about timing. Quarterback takes a drop. He knows when the receiver is going to be where, and he just throws it to a spot, and then usually Jeremiah Smith is there. Well, with Texas being such a good zone team, I expect Malik Muhammad, Jahdae Barron to be pressed up at the line of scrimmage and just try to reroute him completely off of his route from his first step. Because if you just give him a free release and free access, I mean, him and Will Howard have shown that they have the connection to hit that, whatever route they choose, whether it's a slant, whether it's a dig, whether it's an outcut, like, they're going to hit it. They have that relationship. They have that chemistry down, because you just don't want to let them establish that timing. So if you're Ohio State, if you're Chip Kelly, you want to use him in a lot of motion him from one side to the other, maybe stack him behind another receiver. That way, if there's a corner up on the line and he's getting press technique, well, let him press the first guy and then let Jeremiah Smith navigate around him. And then, then they can stay with that chemistry, and, he can get into his route pattern whenever he needs to and be at the spot where Will Howard does. But it's going to be a super interesting matchup. And even if Texas decides to play man, I would encourage them to do the same thing. Get up on the line, because Texas is one of the few teams that actually has the athletes to somewhat run with Jeremiah Smith. I'm not going to say anybody can cover him. Yeah, I'm not going to say anybody can cover him one-on-one, but they're probably the best suit, the best outfit in the secondary to run with him. So if you're going to play man coverage, get up on him, press him, try to knock him off his course, and then just see if he can get back on his route, get back on his stem, and see if him and Will Howard can recreate that chemistry. But moral of the story for Texas, get your hands on Jeremiah Smith early and often. Be physical with him, because I even go back to that OPI that he had against Oregon. If you get if you get hands on a guy early and often in the game, especially a guy like Jeremiah Smith who's so big and so physical, well, he's going to try to bully you right back. And then maybe you can get him on another OPI, or maybe you can start to get in his head a little bit. So the name of the game for Texas, get hands on him. And if you're Ohio State, try to get him touched as least as possible.
Here are my thoughts on the Texas defense. So they are number one in the country in yards per attempt allowed. Really good pass defense, Jim Thorpe Award winner. But they haven't played almost anybody who can throw the ball very well.
Yeah.
Like, all year. And the teams that could, Clemson did. Cade Klubnik, 26 for 43, 336 yards and 3 touchdowns. Sam Levitt's
the GOAT.
God.
Yeah. Sam Levitt's overall numbers not amazing, 24 for 46, but in that second half, he was really moving the ball through the air. And I'm just like looking through the rest of the schedule, and Michigan, Oklahoma, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Florida, Florida was with no DJ Lagway either. Like, Texas's defense has not been tested by a pass offense anywhere near as explosive and talented as this Ohio State pass offense. The receiver group, we know it's the best receiver group in the country. Texas hasn't played anything anywhere near that. So I think there's a real chance here that Ohio State's passing game goes off. the way it has the first couple of games.
I think it'll be interesting. You look at obviously the weapons that Ohio State has are going to be on another level, but even just the quarterback play, Will Howard may not be the best quarterback that is in the world, but it's either him or Carson Beck. In terms of the best ones that they have played all season, maybe you could throw Taylon Green into that, but that's like the closest thing second to it. But it's a good point with this Texas defense, and I think there might be some stuff there. I do think it's worth talking about the quarterbacks because you look at these two guys, and our guy Emmanuel Acho made big news this week. Got a lot of people talking when he said,
for what was he doing?
That Will Howard was the worst quarterback left in this whole tournament, and I can see where he's coming from on it, but also to me, like the gap between the best and the worst quarterback, I think you could rank these guys almost in any order that you wanted to. Like they bring different things to the table. Like how do you compare Riley Leonard with Will Howard? Like they're very different guys. Or like Quinn Ewers, who doesn't run at all, and Riley Leonard. Like it's worth asking though. Like if you had to take your pick in this game, you have Quinn Ewers, obviously way more arm talent, but not very mobile, and can make plays. Probably a higher upside, more talent, but you have Will Howard, who's been on fire the last couple weeks. Quinn's always good for kind of a weird decision or a missed ball here or there. Chris, I guess I'll start with you. Who would you take if you had to pick a quarterback in this game?
I would take Will Howard because he has been pretty consistent all year, even though we didn't totally pay attention to him. He's fourth in the country, completing 72.6% of his passes, 32 touchdowns. He's been efficient in pretty much every game, even the games they lost. The Michigan game was not great, but that was not great for anybody. But Will Howard gets the ball generally to where it needs to go, even if it's the receivers who are kind of the ones who are more flashy. A lot of those touchdowns by Jeremiah Smith and Ibuka and stuff that we've seen in the playoff, Will Howard has been on point with a lot of those throws. And if the guys get wide open, that helps too. But Will Howard, all season long, I think he kind of got dogged a bit because of how that Oregon game ended.
Yeah.
With people not really paying attention to, he's been real solid like all season. I don't think he's had a real stinker where he's cost his team a game. I mean, the reason they lost the Michigan game was because they couldn't
he
run
did
the
have
ball.
some not great picks in that game. That pick in the goal line was
that's right. You're right.
great.
Okay. That was. I'm looking at the stats now. 2 interceptions, 57.6%. That was by far the worst game of his season. He's completed over 62% in every single game otherwise. So the Michigan game, but that was bad for everybody for Ohio State. But everything else, you look at Will Howard's game log, it's pretty consistently solid.
And I like that you bring a quarterback with this much experience. Obviously Quinn Ewers has plenty of experience as well.
Not on this stage though.
Yeah, not on this stage, but Will Howard doesn't either. Quinn played in the playoff last year.
Quinn has it. I'm saying Quinn has the experience on this stage. Quinn has it.
You're right about that, but I think that there's something he said, but if Texas wins this game, Quinn is going to have to win it for them. They're not going to be able to run the ball consistently in this. Will Howard is not going to have to win this game for Ohio State. There's a bunch of other guys. I think your receivers are probably the top of the list. Offensive line probably second. You're not going to ask Will Howard to be Superman. If Will Howard throws more than 25, 30 passes in this game, something has gone wrong, and that's just where they're at. So I don't know. Dame, who do you like in this matchup if you're trying to pick a quarterback?
As much as I hate to say it, because I damn near married Quinn Ewers at the beginning of the season, so I'm sorry to my wife, but I would have to go with Will Howard, and I would say because of his weapons. When you give a guy who, to Chris's point, has been so consistent throughout the year. Hell, even in the last 8 quarters of football that he's played, he's completed 75% of his passes. He's thrown for 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception.
And been dropping some dimes in that mix, too.
And that's another thing. It's one thing for your guys to get open, but he's not missing on any of these deep throws. He's not throwing behind his receivers on crossing routes. He's always hitting the mark. Bill used to always call it whenever a receiver would be wide open down the field and you would miss him, just out-throw him a little bit. He would call those foul balls, it's just a waste of an at-bat or a waste of a swing. Well, Howard's not having a lot of foul balls, so he's got the weapons. You even throw Travion Henderson in there, who's become a huge receiving threat for this offense. And like I said, Will Howard is hitting his guys. So they've been hot, and he's got the hot hand right now. So I would give the quarterback edge to Ohio State and Will Howard.
I'll say this about Quinn, or unless Ubben, you wanted to speak on Quinn.
No, go ahead.
So Quinn Ewers has typically played his best in the biggest games when they matter most. He checked into that max protection on the 4th and 13 conversion. And, he went to Tuscaloosa and won. The game against Washington last year is interesting because the final numbers were good, but he was off a bit in that Washington
he played better
game
in the
last
second
year.
half. The first half was not.
First half was
best.
not good, but he got better. And I think it's just he's been really inconsistent, and we've seen that this year. I still think he's probably a bit banged up. We don't know how. Ever since that oblique injury in the midway point of the season, he hasn't had zip on the ball, but he's thrown some deep balls against Arizona State. One got picked off. One almost got picked off. He hasn't been able to stretch the field in a way that you typically need him to. So that's why I went with Will Howard, because I just think he's been more consistent. But when Quinn is on, he could be the best quarterback in the country. That offense just goes through lulls, like it happened against Arizona State. It's happened at times this year.
Obviously, there's a lot of offensive talent here, but these are two of the best defenses in the country. And not just the total defenses in the country, or two best defenses in the country overall, but especially in the red zone. Texas is third nationally. They've only given up scores on 67.6% of red zone trips, 25 of 37. And Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton. We've talked a lot about them on this show. Both top 10 in Pro Football Focus grades among FBS defensive tackles. And who's better than Texas in the red zone? Ohio State. Second nationally, only 21 scores in 34 trips. That is just under 62%. And obviously they have Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton. Those guys, not quite to the level of Collins and Broughton. The strength of this defense is more on the edges, but those guys are still very good. And again, we're talking about a top 2 rush defense. So I guess let's start there on the defensive fronts. Damien, when you look at a team, both of these teams I think are going to be able to get after the passer. And when you have to change your game plan and account for that, I mean, what does that change for a team offensively when you're not sure what percentage of your playbook you can block?
The easiest way to equalize that is by running the football. Who's going to be able to line up and block the guys in front of them? I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to, because both of these teams are great at getting after the passer. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure in Will Howard's face. There's going to be a lot of pressure in Quinn Ewers' face. We've seen that for Texas all year long. Like, they have allowed pressure to Quinn. Although we've talked about how great these tackles are, I mean, they have given up pressure. So which team is going to be able to line up, just hand the ball off and be like, listen, even if we're about to run the ball, can you stop us? Whoever can do that better, I think will have more of an edge. That way you become more two-dimensional and you don't just put the game on Will Howard or Quinn Ewers' shoulders.
Yeah.
So the notes that we just read off there, the scores that producer Cam brilliantly put in there, those were the total score rates. And I think when you're talking about the red zone, really what matters is touchdown rate. However,
if Ohio you can stop them from scoring, I think that's better than giving up 3, Chris.
well, I mean, based on Texas's field goal kicking, and man, I'm going to come back to that in a second.
Oh, Bert.
Number 2 in the country, red zone touchdown defense, Ohio State. Number 3, Texas. Any guess at who's number 1?
Alabama. I don't know.
It's Penn State.
Why would you say that? Why?
So
I've been watching too much Alabama.
Hey, by the way, Alabama number 6. Just saying.
But
the top 3 red zone defenses are in the semifinals. Notre Dame is 26th. And it comes back to something I felt throughout this entire college football playoff, which is the ability to finish drives has been determining how these games are going. Arizona State kept driving inside the 40 and couldn't finish drives. And Texas was keeping them at arm's length because of that until Arizona State got some big plays, scored in the red zone. Texas couldn't. Texas's offense is like 52nd in the country in red zone scoring. That has been an issue for them the whole time under Sark. And that is one of the things I'm going to, as this game progresses, drive after drive, is a team moving the ball but stalling at the 40, 30-yard line, or are they finishing drives? Boise State couldn't finish drives against Penn State. They would have been right there in that game if they could do that. Arizona State was the same thing. Some of the games that were blowouts, not so much. But even SMU, they drop a 4th down touchdown. They throw a pick in the red zone. Like, you have to be able to get in the end zone when you have the opportunity. And clearly the teams that have stopped that are the teams that are still playing football right now. So that Dame as a player, how much was that emphasized? Like, you can get yards and move up and down the field, but if you're kicking field goals instead of getting touchdowns, what is that really worth?
Yeah, I learned the most about that from Bill, and he always talked about, 7-point swings versus 3-point swings, like just capitalizing in the red zone. I mean, we all know the windows are tighter. There's not as much space. Like when you run the ball, there's more people in the box. Like it just becomes incredibly hard. But the teams that are able to break through that, to your point, are the teams that end up being the best at the end of the season because once it's not enough to get to the red zone. Like getting there and scoring 3 points, that's not going to win you a national championship. Like you want to finish with 7, you want to get in the end zone, but we know it gets hard. So it puts a lot of stress on offensive players. It puts a lot of stress on offensive play callers, especially because these are two coordinators, offensive coordinators, and Chip Kelly and essentially Steve Sarkisian. We know he runs Texas offense, who do a lot of tricks. They do a lot of eye candy, a lot of motion, trying to do a lot of things to distract linebackers, mess up safeties' eyes, mess up their reads. Well, when you're in the 20-yard line and in, you don't really have to read that much. If the ball is handed off, you're just triggering and you're firing. Once you see the quarterback pull the ball up and look to throw, you're right there. You're essentially already in your zone or already in your coverage pattern that you need to be in. So there's so much more condensed space down there. It's just so much harder, but it puts more emphasis on finishing drives. And, it goes beyond just finishing drives because once you continue to finish drives throughout the games, that's how you ultimately finish the game, whether it's on the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball. Like usually it's going to come down to a couple possessions here and there. What happens when you get in the red zone? If you settle for 3 versus if you get a touchdown, because you can always look, a lot of these games are going to be, at least I expect these next couple games to be pretty close games, pretty close matchups.
Hope so.
Yeah, I hope so at least. But then whenever that happens, then you can look and point to a possession here where it's like, okay, well, we got to the 30 and we missed a field goal. And if we had gotten those 3 points, it would have completely changed the outcome of the game. Or we settled for 3 here and we could have got 7, but, my quarterback missed a wide open receiver. He made a bad read, or those 7 points really could have put us ahead. And then we would have been in a different mode and handled the situations of the game later on in a totally different manner.
I mean, did you guys see the Lions-Vikings game on Sunday night? The Vikings kept getting
sort of idly watching it. Yeah,
the Vikings kept getting inside the 10 and couldn't get in the end zone. They missed 4th down twice. They kicked 2 field goals. The Lions ended up winning like 31-9 or whatever it was. That the Vikings would have been in that game if they could finish their drives, and they couldn't. It's such an important thing, and it's why red zone to me is such an important stat.
Texas, by the way, last year in red zone touchdown percentage, 120th. This year, 52nd. There's 2 teams left that are in the top 20. And they are Notre Dame and Penn State, 6th. Shout out to Penn State getting the job done.
Also, Ohio State, by the way, number 2 this year in red zone. I'm sorry, number 5 in red zone touchdown offense.
Yes. I was talking about overall scoring, but yes, in touchdown offenses, Ohio State 5th, 16th, Notre Dame 17th, Penn State. I think it's interesting when you try to preview these games and you're looking at these matchups. There's always interesting matchups, but like every football game, if it's not a blowout, really does come down to like, what do you do when you finish drives? You get 0, 3, or 7. What does the turnover battle look like? You can dissect games every which way you want, but that ends up deciding the game a lot. And maybe I'll sprinkle in, can you get some explosives here or there? Like, I don't think that loses you a game most of the time. I don't think it wins you a game, but it can shift it a little bit. And I think that both of these games, that's going to be what decides it. For our picks, are we all united on taking Ohio State and laying the 6 points here?
I am picking Ohio State.
I am also.
They have been just completely unlocked in this playoff, and it really felt like even the day after they lost to Michigan, if you talk to people who were at that senior tackle, that like they were both angry, but also a weight was kind of lifted off their shoulders now that they can continue to move forward. They have played like the team that I thought was going to go 16-0. And you're playing this game in a dome, which is going to help your offense in general, which is what you like to do. I just think they have been doing things that they weren't doing consistently all season. Rushing the passer, running the ball, finding Jeremiah Smith wide open. Everything is working for this team right now. And you got to ride the hot team right now. They're just that first half against Oregon was the greatest half of football I think I've ever seen in college football. To be leading the number 1 undefeated team 34-0 at one point
on a neutral field.
Yes.
And so I expect, win or lose, I think Ohio State's going to put up a lot of points in this game. And I think that generally bodes well for Ohio State.
Dame, are you going to give a little love to Texas, or are you going to ride the Buckeye wave here?
Here's the thing. As everybody knows I'm the biggest SEC guy in the world, and I would love to die on that SEC, on that sword, and I would love to ride the wave the same way I have been all year. But one, you guys brought up an interesting point and something that I forgot. Texas is kind of like, they're kind of SEC. They're not fully integrated into the SEC yet. So luckily, I don't really have to go through a blue blood SEC team, but I'm going to go with Ohio State. And the reasons why is because I really don't think they're going to be able to run the ball against this Ohio State defense. And when we talked about how bad Texas has been in the red zone, like that is one of the most important statistics, to Chris's point, that you can point out in a game, because a game can be completely competitive. You can outgain your opponent. You can get more turnovers than them. You can do all types of things. You can achieve all these stats or these categories where you outperform your opponent. But if you can't score in the red zone and the other team can, they're more than likely going to win. And Ohio State is much better in the red zone as an offense. Texas, they lull, especially when they get to the 20-yard line and in. We've seen their kicking situation with Bird Auburn. Hopefully Ohio State doesn't run any ball girls out in front of their kickers. That way they don't get any more misses from Bird. But I just think with the combination of not being able to run the ball and not being sure that you're going to walk away with points in the red zone, I'd have to give the edge to Ohio State.